Sticking with matters to do with Eskom and the power situation, poor record keeping and irregular expenditure continues to dog the power utility. The Auditor General's office says the scanty paper trail makes it difficult to ascertain whether the figures audited are in fact a true reflection of Eskom's illegal spending. Lindsay Dentlinger has been tracking discussions on the power utility's 2020-2021 financial results before Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts today and joins us now to discuss that further. Lindsay, thank you. So what has emerged in terms of what has led to irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure to the extent that we have that at Eskom?
Tula, so we should first point out that the Auditor General doesn't audit Eskom's finances itself. As you can imagine, it's a massive audit, and there are several big entities that the Auditor General's office gets in private auditors to conduct the audit, obviously overseen by officials from the Auditor General's office. So we had an official from SNG today going through what they have found during their audit, and as you've pointed out there, Tulas, the irregular expenditure, the poor record keeping continues at the power utility. We heard today from these auditors that there always is this tendency to blame the past, to blame legacy contracts for the irregular expenditure, for the shambles that the accounts are in. But we hear today that the situation continues, and the Auditor General's office saying that because the situation continues, because there is such a lack of documentation to verify when certain transactions are being audited. You can imagine the number of transactions that go through a company like Eskom. They select a sample and then they want to test these. They don't have the documents, and the paper trail is lacking for them to verify whether in fact these transactions are above board. And the Auditor General's office saying today that we cannot just blame old contracts for the irregular expenditure, for the poor record keeping, because it's still something that is continuing, and that even though in this financial year we would see the irregular expenditure having dropped somewhat from around 14 billion rand in the previous financial year to just over 11 billion rand in this financial year, they can't be 100% sure to us whether that is in fact a true reflection and whether we can for certain say that irregular expenditure has dropped at the power utility. So really a picture still of uncertainty as relates the illegal spending, non-compliance with the PFMA in terms of these transactions, and in some way they have pointed out that it could also be some of this expenditure almost forced on Eskom, if you will, because they need to get Treasury approval, and we heard today that sometimes that can take some time, and maybe forcing Eskom's hand somewhat to engage in this expenditure before they can get approvals from Treasury, just so that they can keep the lights on to us.
So that is on the side of irregular expenditure, Lindsay. But what's coming out around the situation in as far as debt? The last time we got an update from Eskom was at the end of the financial year, and they were telling us that they were able to reduce this debt quite significantly to around 400 billion rand. But there's general concern, at least from Parliament, in this regard.
There most definitely is, and right off the bat, the Auditor General's office are pointing out that they are very concerned that those guarantees that Eskom has, these 6-year guarantees, which allows it to get itself into this kind of debt, there's about a year left, and around about this time next year, they will need at least 152 billion rand in the bank to us to be able to service some of the debt, some 22 billion rand just in the interest payments. So a real concern, the Auditor General's office saying either they need to be better at revenue collection, and that's another issue that was raised before the committee today, that Eskom's just not doing enough to get back the money that it is owed from its clients, not only municipalities but individual households who buy directly from Eskom. They don't feel that Eskom is doing enough to ensure that they get what is due to them, or if they don't have this money in the bank, to us, the Auditor General's office say government will once again have to stump up the cash, which is really concerning, and also pointing out that either Eskom does a better job at getting the money due to them, or they resolve this issue that we know is a perennial one regarding the tariffs. Eskom always insisting that what we pay for electricity is not reflective of what they need to put into the plant to bring us that electricity. So really stuck between a rock and a hard place as to how Eskom is going to manage to start repaying some of those guarantees that it has to lend that, as you point out, over 400 billion rand in debt.
Yeah, and it fits in nicely, Lindsay, with the medium-term budget policy statement of the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, right? Because the guarantees that Eskom holds and the amount of debt has consistently been flagged as one of the key risks to the South African economy.
It is indeed, Thulas, ahead of tomorrow's medium-term budget policy statement. That is the albatross around government's neck, because those guarantees are shored up by the National Treasury. So a huge concern. It places a huge strain on the fiscus. And you should also not forget that just 2 years ago, there is a special bill was tabled to pump more money into Eskom, to get it back on its feet again, and ongoing at the same time. We shouldn't forget there's also this unbundling process, separating the company into 3 different parts, and then who's going to take on this debt to us. That is always been up for discussion, how it divvies up this debt between these 3 companies, and whether in fact it can divvy up the debt, because the debt is granted to Eskom as a company as a whole, and not to individual companies that it will break up. So as you said, the load shedding and all those issues aside, Eskom's debt and its financial problems are not only Eskom's problems, they are the Treasury and the public purse's problem to us.
All right, Lindsay Dentlinger live for us there in Cape Town, updating us on what has come out in Parliament there around the issues to do with Eskom and its financial situation. Certainly a team under pressure there, led by Andre de Ruyter, with calls at the moment for him to resign or be removed.